We want to be thinking about who we are versus who we wound up being. Now, as we advance down the road of identity, what I want to reinforce here is the power of stories. You and I, and the rest of us, tell ourselves stories all day long. But one of the ways I look at stories, these are ways that we become emotionally attached to what I'll call imaginary things. Now, for example, when I use the word me, right, who I am, or you use the word me and who you are, look, it's an elaborate mental framework. You devised it, and it doesn't exist. It only exists in your head or in my head. Defining oneself versus seeing who you are is simply a matter of making choices. Look, I hear people say, look, I'm a night person. And I say, well, yes, perhaps. Now, that's a label you give yourself, and you can get locked into that label. Or you can say, look, I'm a night person. Or you can say, look, I often choose to work late at night. Sometimes that works well for me. It breaks the pattern of locking your identity into being a night person. You might say, I'm unproductive. Or you could shift that language, which is so important in the development of stories, and choose maybe instead to say, look, I choose to do things that aren't useful from time to time. I know it, but I also know I have the power to do things that are productive. You've got to be kind to yourself. Look, by definition, right, the definition you have for yourself is to creating the boundaries, right, that you either expand or constrict, or the swim lanes that you stay in. They're defined by the stories you tell yourself. As you define yourself and you think about the language you use and the words of crafting this identity, I want to caution you to be careful not to define yourself on what you are not. Now, you may have thought to yourself or hear the language in other people, I'm not successful, or I am not fit, I am not intelligent, I'm not motivated. What's important really to capture here is language matters as we become what we think about, and language is how we talk to ourselves. It's the story. So we're either explaining our life or we're experiencing our life. So if we're explaining our lives, that means we're trying to defend or justify something. So if you are explaining things, ask yourself, what am I defending? And why am I defending? What am I afraid of? Why do I feel it's necessary to have someone buy in or agree with my defensive position? What we defend influences how we form our stories and thus how we live our lives. So I have to think about two people. There's who I am and who I want you to think I am. And many of us live in the world of this manufactured identity. It becomes quite tiring. That identity of who I want you to think I am, I spend years trying to cultivate it, and it takes me away from who I came into the world to be, my authentic self. So we want to be thinking about who we are versus who we wound up being. And the important thing is to try to close that gap, to strive to remain congruent with that self that we know deep down in our heart we are and who we are meant to be. Now, a frequent reminder of getting off track is when I recognize that I'm telling myself a story that doesn't serve me. We have the power of the pause to tell ourselves when the disempowering story appears, and it will from time to time, I am not this version of the story. So the meanings we give to things, the importance we give to stories, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. We write the scripts and we step onto those movie sets and we get the outcomes of those identities. Now think about other people in your life. If you listen closely, you can hear an aspect of another person's identity. They're either defending or promoting something in their story. There's something they want you to believe. Maybe it's something they want to believe first. And how we experience others is also quite important. Look, we make up stories about other people, and then we behave as if those stories are true. They do the same for us. So being authentic, understanding who we are, what we stand for, what we won't fall for, who we intend to be and why, allows us to cultivate the types of actions and habits and the campaign and the people who are going to help us live into that future we want to get to. When we get there or along the path, we can do our life's work. That's the power of identity.